The tight end landscape is very strange at the minute, with Travis Kelce having completely dropped off and people being used to the dominant forces at tight end that kind of no longer exist when you look at pure points per game. But we have an incredibly exciting rookie class at tight end, highlighted by two players that could easily go within the first round of the NFL draft, and some very exciting tight ends who are young and have already broken out. So let's take a look at the tight end landscape this offseason. So starting off with the elite tier, and it's worth a conversation to start off with about what being elite at the tight end position really means. Brock Bowers finished as the tight end 1 this season, and in PPR leagues that meant he finished with 15.5 points per game, which would have been good enough to see him finish as the wide receiver 9 this season, just above JSN, which isn't actually that bad compared with last season where Sam Laporta had 13.9 points per game, which would have been kind of a mid-range wide receiver 2. But it's not quite the same levels that we were hitting with Travis Kelce through the late 2010s and through the beginning of 2020s, where Travis Kelce was quite consistently hitting like wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 numbers in terms of points per game in a season. So I think there's an interesting question about what being elite at the position really means. Obviously, it's a onesie position in fantasy, normally anyway, so you really want a true difference maker. And Brock Bowers was a difference maker this season. Bowers basically and Trey McBride, George Kittle were the only tight ends that you really wanted on your roster that could make a huge difference to your team in terms of points per game. But they're not quite the same dominant game breakers that we are used to. We were really spoilt by that dominant run of 4 seasons in a row at the tight end 1 position for Travis Kelce. Even Mark Andrews was 17.1 points per game in the 2022 season, or 2021 season, which is the first one that Kelce hadn't finished at the tight end 1 spot. 2022, I think. So I think it's a really interesting question about what being elite actually means here. And these players, so Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, this is my shortest elite tier at any position. And this was quite an easy one. I don't think there's anyone even close to on their level. Sam Laporta, we've seen obviously massively drop off this season, finishing as the PPR tight end 8 overall, compared to tight end 1 last season. And it showed that kind of touchdown regression in that offense made a huge difference for him. Through the first half of the season, he was barely even a part of the offense. He was barely startable in fantasy, and he was going in redraft leagues kind of towards the second round. We assumed he'd build on that dominant rookie season, and he really hasn't. So for me, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride are a clear tier ahead of anyone else. Then you're kind of looking at the old guard, so George Kittle, probably the next tight end for me, sitting currently at my tight end 3. Then if you really want to look elsewhere, you've got some of those older players, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, even TJ Hawkinson as well. Tucker Kraft I have rated quite highly, but that elite tier is kind of sitting way beyond anyone else. They're younger players. Brock Bowers actually for me is a fair point ahead of Trey McBride. I'm intrigued to see what happens at quarterback. I do think his quarterback brief, he obviously finished at tight end 1 with a combination of Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell and Desmond Ridder. So I'm pretty confident in his ability to kind of get it done with any quarterback. But I definitely think it's worth considering when you have these elite players. What does that actually mean? When I say Jahmyr Gibbs is my running back 1, does that mean he's way clear of anyone else? Does that mean I trade him for Justin Jefferson? No, it doesn't. I would value probably kind of in startups 8 to 10 wide receivers before I take Brock Bowers. And in Superflex, you're looking all the way down at kind of quarterback 14, 15 before I'm taking Bowers in a startup, because I don't think he's that true positional advantage. Maybe he will be. He looks absolutely dominant, but it's not quite the same positional advantage that we've been looking at previously, just because I don't think anyone is Travis Kelce. But if anyone has a chance of replicating that sheer dominance, it is Brock Bowers, who was absolutely incredible this year, an absolute steal, and is not going to be next year going into redraft. I think he probably goes towards the back of the first round. Then onto my at-risk players. So starting off here, 3 of these first 4 are because they are probable cut candidates this offseason, with a fair amount of money tied up in them and a fair amount of cap reliefs if you are able to cut them. Tyler Higbee was obviously really good for the Rams down the stretch, but I think the Rams want a kind of more viable move tight end as their tight end 1. They tried to trade up for Dalton Kincaid. They tried to trade up for Brock Bowers. I would not be surprised to see them targeting either Tyler Warren or Colston Loveland in the first round this offseason. I think they'll pick too late for Tyler Warren, but potentially Loveland could be a target there. But I mean, Tyler Higbee isn't hugely fancy relevant. He could be a decent tight end too, but I think probably he ends up getting cut by the organisation this summer. Evan Ingram, probably the same thing. I can see him getting cut. This is going to tie into one of my trade targets later on, but they save a fair amount on the cap if they cut Evan Ingram this offseason, so I can see them making that move. Taysom Hill is the same thing. Obviously, he just got injured and he's 34 years old. I can see him leaning towards retirement. So if you can get rid for a third now, I'd probably do it. Obviously, these aren't hugely important players. Dalton Kincaid is the really interesting one for me here. So Dalton Kincaid this last season, and I'm having to scroll all the way down on one side to try and get to him, finishes the tight end 30, which is genuinely absurd. So only 44 receptions, 75 targets. So if you actually look at targets, he's the 15th highest targeted tight end, but finishes tight end 30. This is like really, really disappointing for Kincaid. Loads of people were talking about him. You know, he was going in the 5th round in redraft last year, and people were talking about him as, you know, the number one target on that offense. And it's really not worked out that way. It's Khalil Shakir, and then probably looking at Keon Coleman, and then maybe you'd think about Kincaid, but he's been really disappointing. If you can move off of him and get decent value because people are still into the name with the first round draft capital, I would do it. I'm obviously recording this off the back of last night's conference championship where he had that key drop, which obviously made a huge difference to the game, but I don't think he's the player that we've wanted him to be, and now 2 years into the league, he's been really disappointing. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Bills not move on from him. He's obviously on the roster, but look for more weapons on offense in the passing game. They still don't have an established number one wide receiver, so they might look to potentially get that, and then Dalton Kincaid falls down to, you know, 4th in the pecking order in the passing game. So I think potentially he's at risk of not losing his job, but losing any semblance of targets that he currently had. It's a really disappointing free agent class. It's mostly older players. The two big ones, Mike Gesicki and Zach Ertz, obviously quite fancy relevant this year. Zach Ertz, I'm going to assume, is going to be back with the Commanders. He played really well in the NFC Championship game. He's played really well all season and surprised a lot of people with where he's ended up finishing. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him actually continue there. Yeah, finishes the tight end 7 this season in PPR leagues. So Zach Ertz, I think, probably stays. Mike Gesicki, I think, probably doesn't. And so he's the exciting free agent tight end this offseason, which kind of says all you need to know about the free agent class coming into next season. If you are enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Like I've mentioned, my next series coming is going to be my prospect scouting profiles. I'm looking to do 50 players in 50 days with a series of 5-minute videos, introducing you to the players, talking about their likely draft capital, their strengths, their weaknesses, and where I think they're going to go in rookie drafts after the draft this upcoming April. If you're excited for that, please consider subscribing, and all of that content will be with you in the next few weeks. But let's carry on and start taking a look at my trade targets at the tight end position. So I have 3 trade targets, and the first one on the list I'm really excited about. This is a player I've written up for DLF. This is a player that's featured quite regularly in my Dynasty trade videos, Theo Johnson. Out of Penn State, an absolutely incredible athlete who ultimately ended up being drafted on day 2 by the Giants, and quite an exciting prospect. Tight ends normally take a fair amount of time to develop, but he did show some promise last season. Obviously, the Giants are going to be making a change at quarterback going into next season, potentially looking at either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. They have Malik Neighbors established as their wide receiver 1. Wandale Robinson's their wide receiver 2, who is, you know, a fine slot player, but nothing else, doesn't bring anything else positive to the passing game. So having Theo Johnson as the number 2 option seems pretty likely for next season, being an athletic freak. We often say that tight ends are the best friend of a rookie quarterback, and I can see this being the case, particularly if it's Shedeur Sanders that they end up with. So I can see him being the number 2 in the passing game with an exciting rookie quarterback, or with a rookie quarterback. I don't know how exciting you can call these quarterback prospects. And I think you can probably get him for at most like a late 2. I think people are sleeping on Theo Johnson. So he's my number 1 trade target. Kyle Pitts is the next one. Kyle Pitts is still incredibly athletic. The talent is still there. It's been really disappointing. I would like to see him go to a situation that knows how to use him a little bit more. I can actually see the Rams trading for him for, you know, a fourth or something. I think it's quite likely that he moves this offseason. I don't think they want any part of him in Atlanta, so I can see him being moved, and I can see him potentially breaking out elsewhere. But this is you know, you're going to get him relatively cheap, so if you can spend a late 2 on Kyle Pitts, I'd be more than willing to do it. And then Brenton Strange, he performed really well in Evan Ingram's absence last season, and actually even with Ingram back in the lineup, he was still performing for your fantasy team, except in the championship game, because he was playing pure tight end, whereas Evan Ingram was starting in the slot when they had all of their wide receivers injured, except Brian Thomas Jr. Brenton Strange is likely to be the starting tight end on the Jaguars next season. They obviously have an exciting offensive mind coming in. Liam Cohen really featured Cade Otton in that passing game, and they still, you know, Trevor Lawrence is still a good quarterback. He's still someone I'm keen on. He was one of my trade targets in the quarterback video. So I'd definitely be considering making a move for Brenton Strange, and I think you can probably get him for a 3rd round pick, and I think he's probably going to be a starting tight end this season, even if Evan Ingram doesn't get cut or traded. I can see them potentially featuring Brenton Strange a little bit more as more of that classic tight end. Quite a similar player to Cade Otton, so I can see Liam Cohen quite liking him in the receiving game next season. Then, as I mentioned, it's quite an exciting tight end class this year. So it's highlighted really by 3 names at the top, 2 first-round talents, just Tyler Warren out of Penn State, Colston Loveland out of Michigan, and Harold Frannon Jr. out of Bowling Green. And these are quite different prospects. So Tyler Warren is a really fantastic all-round tight end, so incredible red zone weapon, really a plus in the passing game, but fantastic size as well, like absolutely willing and able blocker, quite a dominant blocker actually at some points, but like a really classic tight end. He won the John Mackey Award this year for the top tight end in football. You know, 6'6", 260 pounds. He's going to go midway through the 1st round at the latest. Like, I think the Colts pick is probably the floor for him, the Colts or the Broncos. Colston Loveland then is a fantastic catcher of the ball, but probably less so in the blocking game. And it probably might take him a bit more time to develop in terms of his route running, whereas I think Tyler Warren is a better route runner already. Like, I think he's a versatile weapon, and I think you can use him in different ways. You can align him in different ways along the field to make him sort of a bit of a mismatch. And he obviously has like really high-end ball skills. Struggled a little bit this year, but the Michigan offense did struggle a little bit after Jim Harbaugh left. Wouldn't be surprised to see him ending up going to the Chargers, given that they need a tight end. And obviously then that Jim Harbaugh connection. But he's currently being mocked towards the end of the 1st round. So I'd be really interested to see Colston Loveland when he gets into the league. Then Harold Fannin Jr. to me like is the clear tight end 3. He was a really dominant player this season, but the problem for him is that even though he's very athletic and a very good catcher of the ball, 6'4", 230, that size deficiency, if you're actually going to play wide tight end, is going to really make you struggle. He really struggles in the blocking game. You sometimes see him absolutely get sort of swept back if he's trying to like chip an edge, or even if he's being forced to block one-on-one. He's really going to struggle if he's playing against someone powerful. He is not the strongest player. And then a lot of the routes that he ran were very manufactured. He's very fast. He's a really good yak weapon. Like, if you get someone that knows how to use Harold Fannin Jr., he can definitely be a plus in the receiving game. He can work as a tight end too, but he's not going to be on the field in running down. So if you are looking for a 3-down tight end, it's probably not going to be him. You're probably looking to one of the others. But these 3 are really exciting prospects, and definitely more exciting than we've had the last few years. Aside from that top-end option of obviously Brock Bowers last year. It's a good tight end class. I'm intrigued to see where the top 2 go especially. So that is going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. This is the last of my positional landscape videos. As I said earlier, I'm moving on to my scouting videos now, which is very exciting. I hope you are excited for them. Please consider liking and subscribing to make sure that you're there to watch them when they start coming out. Have a great week, and I will see you next time.